You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with Conservative Home's Deputy Editor, Henry Hill, and the journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. With the escalating global trade war and Donald Trump's imposition of huge new tariffs on goods from China, now totalling 104%, is top story in the Financial Times. Those massive new tariffs are also the lead item in the Eye, while The Guardian describes the US and China as being on a collision course over trade. Behind the scenes in Washington, the Telegraph leads with the verbal spat between Elon Musk and Mr. Trump's senior man on trade. Top story for The Times is the news that London has dropped down the list of super-rich cities because of a massive exodus by millionaires. A cruel life. The Mirror focuses on the story of a 16-year-old boy stabbed to death in Huddersfield last week after fleeing war-torn Syria, where he'd been injured in a bombing. The Mail claims a victory after getting the Health Secretary's backing for its campaign for a national prostate cancer screening programme. Prince Harry's court case, where he's demanding better security protection in the UK, despite no longer being a working royal, is top story in the Metro, with the headline sidelined. With Harry's father away in Rome when he arrived in London, The Sun says it's once again a case of moan alone. The Express carries an attack by Reform on a Lib Dem-controlled local council, which it says has banned a VE Day parade because it's claimed to be too elitist. And Jurassic Bark. The Star reports on claims by scientists that they brought back, using DNA from ancient bones, a species of wolf extinct for 10,000 years. True story. We're joined tonight by Henry Hill and Jenny Kleeman to take us through the papers. Welcome to you both. We're not starting with Jurassic wolves. We are starting with trade wars. And front page of the Eye, Trump hitting China with 104% tariffs coming in from midnight tonight, stateside.
Yeah, Trump today had been saying that he was expecting China to get on the phone at some point, but that didn't happen. And now there are going to be these ridiculous 104% tariffs on Chinese products. China has said that it's going to fight to the end. They're not going to make any concessions. And it was a weird day today because finally there was a bit of calm after 3 days of market turmoil, after there was a suggestion by some members of the Trump administration that perhaps the tariffs policy was a means to an end, wasn't necessarily going to come into full force. And so things calmed down a little bit. But then at around 7 o'clock this evening, we had the news that China had not backed down and Trump was fulfilling his promise to fight back with a vengeance. And, you know, this is about politics. You know, it's not about economics, it's not about anything to do with global markets. This is about two leaders with very big, very fragile egos showing that they won't back down. And they are the leaders of the two biggest economies in the world. And China is the world's factory. It has it does an enormous amount of trade with the US, and, you know, the enormous sum I was reading, that there was something like $600 billion worth of trade between the two countries, 3/4 of which is goods from China coming to the US. Laptops, phones, toys. But China also imports a lot of soy from the US, which it uses to feed pigs. You know, they are interdependent. And this kind of rhetoric is worrying for the rest of the world. The rest of the world will feel the impact of all of this, and this kind of aggressive isolationism on the part of Trump. You know, history shows us that this does not, this doesn't end well, essentially.
Henry, is Jenny right? Is this about two egos? China didn't start this, did they?
No, they didn't. I mean, obviously, it's a huge relief that of all the two countries not to start negotiating, it's the two countries that could have a war that would end the world. But this is fundamentally about the fact that China considers itself a great power, right? And so does the United States. And this has always been a feature of modern Chinese foreign policy. They had something called the Century of Humiliations, which is where basically they were 100 years ago or so, they were very exposed to Western powers. And so they've been trying to sort of put that behind them and really exercise that ghost ever since. I remember once after one of the that plane crash in Southeast Asia, where there were lots of Chinese citizens on board, the official statement from Beijing was, we expect Chinese citizens to conduct themselves as befits citizens of a great power, which is not something you can imagine the Home Office issuing any time this side of like 1910, right? So it is a real political concern. And of course, the challenge for Trump is there is a case to be made in that maybe a completely interdependent global trading system was a bit utopian at a point when countries like China exist, right? And that you want to use tariffs to protect strategic industries. You want to make sure that you avoid things like bottlenecks in Taiwan on the manufacture of certain sorts of microprocessor. Quite boring, granular, but strategically important. But nobody really, I think, wants the mass re-import of what China does now, which is sort of the manufacture of consumer electronics, right? Is that something that Trump really wants to bring back to the United States? Are his voters prepared for how much more expensive everything would be if that was the case? So the hope has to be that all the other countries seem to be negotiating or open to negotiating their way out of this. But that will count for very little if China and the United States end up going to the moon with this.
But Jenny, eventually, do you think that China will be forced to capitulate in this?
Well, I mean, they're using very strong language. They're saying
at the moment,
fight to the end. I don't think, China cares very much about saving face in all of this. And once they've said that, they're not going to row back from it. And, following on from what you said, if we look even beyond electronics, things like garment manufacture, are Americans going to go and work in garment factories, particularly at a time when immigration, there is such a sort of clampdown on migrant labour and migrant work? Are you really going to have Americans going and working in garment factories? I find it very, very difficult to believe that they're going to want to do this. So the idea that you can wholesale, that it's either people are going to be prepared to pay the higher prices for the tariffs or it's all going to be made within the country, it just seems completely fantastical. Donald Trump has been saying that this isn't a negotiating tactic. These tactics are real and they're here to stay. But how can they be anything other than a negotiating tactic? Because in real terms, I can't see how this would work.
Well, why is he saying that he's waiting for China to call then, if it's not a negotiating tactic?
Well, I mean, he has been saying he's waiting for China to call. He's also been saying the tariffs are not a negotiating tactic. He's the one saying, I mean, clearly they are. I hope they are, because I hope there is at least some sense in all of this. But this is our thing. Before he was inaugurated, the kind of word everyone was using about Donald Trump was he's going to be a transactional president. And this is not transactional. He's a bully, and he's kind of trying to brutalise everyone with the full extent of the power that he has. And when you use tactics like that against a country like China, they are not going to respond very well. It's not the right recipe to get them to come to any negotiating table.
And that's exactly what they've said, Henry. I mean, today the Chinese Foreign Ministry saying that, the US state was an economic bully. And meanwhile, in all of this, it will be actually the consumers that suffer, the American consumers.
Yeah, there's obviously some irony in China saying that to anyone familiar with how China conducts itself overseas, particularly in Africa, with the Belt and Road Initiative. Basically, it loans a country money to build a port. That country can't repay it. Now it owns the port. And it's done an awful lot of that. So giving China the opportunity to look like the good guy is actually quite an impressive optical achievement. The Chinese embassy in Washington today retweeted a clip of a speech by Ronald Reagan, which is not something that I ever thought the Chinese state would be doing. So, but as you say, beyond the kind of high politics of this, the fact is that we do live in a very globally interdependent economy, and that has made a lot of things cheaper and done an awful lot to drive up living standards in the third world and the developing world, right? Because when we talk about offshoring jobs, what that means is that there's been a big flow of capital into manufacturing economies in other parts of the world. And the danger, again, for Trump is that there was a really good case for strategic tariffs against China on things like steel. There was a really good case for trying to diversify certain defence and electronic systems, rare earth minerals. But he may have just discredited that for a generation by desperately trying to close down Chinese stock factories and get them back to California.
Let's have a look at the Telegraph, and this is an internal spat, I guess you'd say, between Elon Musk and Peter Navarro, the US President's senior counsellor for trade. What's happening here, Jenny?
Well, Max, our producer, was pointing out the fact that this headline is not in quotation marks, which does invite you to ask which one of them is as dumb as a sack of bricks. Peter Navarro accused Elon Musk of being against these tariffs because Elon Musk is a car manufacturer through his company Tesla, and who benefits from cheap foreign parts. And, of course, Elon Musk went on X, which, of course, used to be Twitter until he bought it and ruined it, and he...
In your humble opinion.
In my humble opinion, in the opinion of lots of people too, saying that Peter Navarro was as dumb as a sack of bricks. And then he went on again afterwards and said, I'd like to apologise for my comments previously saying that he was as dumb as a sack of bricks. This is an insult to bricks. So this is a level of intellectual energy being spent at the moment by those really closest to power in the US. But it does show that there are splits, divisions of opinion within the top echelons of the White House administration. It is significant and also kind of strange that Elon Musk is part of this, given how much he has been vocal actually recently about how he hopes that there will be no tariffs. But surely this entire policy runs counter to all of his interests and his experience in business.
Henry, does this show the beginnings of a departure from being in that inner circle with Donald Trump?
I mean, it always seemed unlikely that it would manage to last for the long term just because of the sheer size of the egos involved. There was probably going to be a clash at some point. But this also isn't the first time that Elon Musk has done this, right? There was a row a few months ago over what I think are called HB1 visas in the United States, which are sort of their equivalent of a high-skill visa, I think. And he was obviously hugely pro this because that means that companies like Tesla can go and talent poach from all over the world. And the Republican Party, which wants to crack down on immigration, was not pro this policy. And so for a while it looked as if the MAGA mob might just drive him out of the Trump circle altogether. And then he decided to start talking about Rotherham, and everyone forgot about the visa thing. But there is a tension, obviously, between the sort of multimillionaire industrialist interest, of which there is quite a lot behind Trump, and Trump's base, which, if you were to go back 50 years, would probably look an awful lot more like the Democrat base, a lot of it, right? You'd think, OK, blue-collar workers, manufacturing sectors, trade unionists. This is not the kind of political coalition you'd expect to be falling in behind an American president. And this certainly isn't the economic policy you'd expect a Republican president to be pursuing.
Henry and Jenny, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break, but coming up, Ukraine's president claims Chinese soldiers have been caught fighting for Russia. We'll discuss that next.
Paris reverberated to the sights, sounds and smells of conflict. There's a focal point to all this anger, and that is Emmanuel Macron. I'm Adam Parsons, Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. There are dozens of people desperately clambering to get onto that boat. It is a chaotic scene, but it's being watched by dozens of French police officers on the beach. I've reported on migration across Europe, close up on the ground, understanding that sense of desperation and meeting the criminal gangs behind it. This old fishing boat set off from the Libyan port of Tobruk. There were 606 people who were on board. So we've been distributing life jackets to all the people on board this boat, and now the first person is coming on board. This is the ugly side of Italian football.
In Italy, everything is really organized.
Football's problems with hooliganism, racism were just dormant, and now they're back and they're getting worse. We cover so many countries, languages and cultures and work hard to gain trust to bring you the full story first. Help is slowly reaching these places. It's not just homes, but whole streets like this one that have been reduced to rubble and dust. This is a picture of destruction. Everywhere you look in this mountaintop community, there is absolute devastation. These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel.
The least we can do is just kick them out of our land.
Gaza, which is just 2 miles in that direction, is under attack again.
Getting the chance to tell people's stories, it's a privilege.
We arrive. A secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away. So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview, still with me, Henry Hill and Jenny Kleeman. Let's take a look in this section, first of all, at the Telegraph front page. And this story about Chinese soldiers caught fighting for Russia. Zelensky tweeted about this today, but posted on social media that these 2 Chinese citizens, as he described them, were captured fighting for Russia.
Yeah, it's not clear at this point who these people are or what it means. There's no suggestion that I've seen that China has sent troops to Ukraine. North Korea is alleged to have made some kind of deployment into Russia of, admittedly, for North Korea, quite a limited number of 10,000 troops, but there's no suggestion that China's done that. So I guess the most obvious thing is that these people would have been just recruited by Russia or by one of the PMCs that Russia pretends are not part of its military. Russia has been managing to keep up its troop replenishment rates without conscription because it's using, I think it spends 7% of GDP on defence. It's using that to pay quite good salaries. So it's perfectly possible that these individuals signed up as individuals in Russia in the same way that, say, Ukraine has foreign volunteers fighting for it, in which case the diplomatic significance of that will probably be fairly limited. Of course, if it does turn out that these are something else, then that would be very different. But I suspect that if they were Chinese special forces, they probably wouldn't have just got tired of the Russians and crossed over to the Ukrainian trenches to surrender.
So possibly mercenaries. We've not heard from China on this, have we?
No, we haven't. But we know that Ukraine is on this geopolitical fault line. It's forcing everyone to pick a side. Which side are you on? And it is interesting how Zelensky has played this and could continue to play this, given the situation between China and the US in their trade war. You know, this could be a useful bargaining chip in his discussions with Donald Trump, who, let's remind ourselves, said he would end this war on day one. And then he said it might take a few weeks. We still have made absolutely no progress at all towards ending this war because his concentration is elsewhere. But yes, Zelensky could use this discovery to his advantage. And it seems from the way that he displayed what he had found out today, it seems that that's what he intends to do.
Henry, take us to the Metro. And Prince Harry's been in court appealing the decision around his protection while he's in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, essentially the Home Office decided that when Prince Harry stepped back from frontline full-time royal duties that he would no longer qualify for the full-time police protection while in the UK that other members of the royal family receive, and he is challenging this. He said basically that they've carved out they've treated him, they've given him special treatment, but it's worse. You know, they've created a bespoke system in order to just take this security away from him, and that his family needs it to be protected from racism and extremism in the UK. The Home Office is saying, we're not saying you can't have police protection, it's just that the decision needs to be made on a case-by-case basis because, you know, the members of the royal family are performing a state function, effectively, and you're not. I imagine their lawyers might also point out that Harry, most of the time, lives in America where he has no state protection at all, and if his private security, which he has, is good enough for him there, as at least as a first line of defence, it's probably good for him here.
Just reading a little fact that he's the first royal ever photographed inside a courtroom.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting because this is in the Court of Appeal. There were cameras in there. And it's being, you know, this is being held in front of 3 senior judges. And also, Harry doesn't need to be there. That's the other thing. He didn't give evidence today, but he was there. And that's because these court cases for him, and it was the same with his cases against Associated Newspapers and everybody else, they're very, very personal to him. He makes, you know, they are a kind of personal fight for him, and they have meaning beyond the meaning of just the case. And lots of other papers have made the case that, you know, he was in the UK at the same time as his father. They didn't meet up. He's very much come here in order to be present. He wants special treatment, but not the special treatment that they're giving him, that they've offered him. So I don't know. I feel sorry for him. Perhaps not in the way that he wants people to feel sorry for him, but I pity him when I see him, you know, in court like this.
In what way?
Well, just he's a kind of... He's rudderless. He seems to have no role, and he's full of grudges and feeling slighted, and it's difficult to kind of see what he's for.
And finally, as they say, our last story in the, well, it's on the front page of The Star, not a paper we'd normally cover, but these delightful puppies aren't perhaps what they seem.
Yeah. So basically, the dire wolf is an absolutely vast species of wolf that died out 10,000 years ago, and the press, at least the press team for these scientists, is saying that they have managed to bring them back from the dead using recovering the DNA sequencing and everything else. If you dig
De-extinction.
De-extinction. There we go. What they've actually done, if you dig into it, is they've made a bigger wolf. Which is, you know, and I'm all for scientists inventing new animals. Right, bring it on.
No, but it isn't a new animal.
But it is. They have not actually recreated completely.
They've edited a grey wolf, and they have created some very gorgeous images of little wolf pups that everyone wants to put on their papers and wherever, and we're all going, oh, but it's not what it seems at all.
They haven't completely recreated the genetic sequence of an old dire wolf.
They haven't de-extincted anything.
They have modified a grey wolf so that it is more like a dire wolf.
I spoke to Dr. Beth Shapiro, Chief Scientific Officer at Colossal Biosciences earlier.
At Colossal Biosciences? The company behind this.
It was de-extinction.
No.
To a point.
To a point.
Plus cloning.
No, it's not.
That's what she said.
Well, the geneticist Adam Rutherford, whose excellent Substack I read on the way here, was saying this is just complete rubbish, and this is just a company that is trying to... He said it's the equivalent... They've edited such a small number of genes of a grey wolf to make these pups. They made tiny, tiny little differences. And because we've all seen the film Jurassic Park, we imagine that you could somehow suck out the DNA of a completely... de-extinct thing.
We must leave it there, but thank you very much for the explanation and disagreeing with the scientists. See you in 11.